asked to spend some time as well this morning talking about what he learned in the time afterwards. Carl and I went to college together. So he hasn't seen the Taj Mahal, he hasn't seen Qutb Minar, he hasn't seen India Gate. Well, he saw India Gate yesterday from a distance in the rain. But he's busy talking to people, and we're grateful for his willingness to do that. So, without further introduction, Mr. Carl.
Thank you. Thanks, Leslie. Good morning. I was really excited when he said there's going to be a bike ride. And I'm like, yeah.
Cycles here.
Oh, sorry. You understand. You understand. And then I don't, the bicycle didn't show up. And I'm going to have to pedal in Delhi another day.
He wanted to ride with us today.
My wife and I, in 2009, we rode, some of you are familiar with the northwest corner there, the state of Washington, Seattle, up in that area. We live about 5-hour drive east of Seattle. So we pedaled our bicycles in 2009 from Spokane, my hometown, across the mountains to Seattle, down the west coast to Los Angeles. So we pedaled about 1,100 miles. But we did it over 7 months. And we would stop at schools along the way and speak. So on the back of our bicycle, we had a sleeping bag and a tent. And yeah, I'm still shaking my head too when I think about that. What kind of crazy, but it was wonderful. You see the world different when you see it from a cycle. Very, very different. And so that was just one of the highlights of my life, really. And my wife, that gives you an idea what an amazing woman my wife is. Huh? Yeah. Across America. And so when we ride bikes, you say, well, you can ride and I'll drive the car or something like that, but no. She was, and you know, she has this positive spirit that always looks for the good. And you need that on a long bicycle journey like that. You know, we're going up the one side of the Cascade Mountain Range, and she's just looking around at all the beauty and never one word of complaining the whole trip, rain and wind. So I really, yeah, and I really wish that I could have ridden with you this morning, but I'm really glad that I can share some stories with you. Okay, my phone went to sleep. I need to take it off battery save here so that we can get it back up on the screen. You come again. Thank you. Every once in a while, after I mess with it for back and forth a couple times, it says reset me. And so I think right now it's telling me to reset me. So we'll do that. We'll put you to bed. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And while it's waking up again, you know how you wait for that little apple to show up.
Someone used to call Steve Jobs.
We will, it'll come back here in a moment. But I'm a visual learner. There's our apple, so it's coming back. I'm going to do my best to kind of summarize 1994, actually, when this happened. I was the only American that stayed in the Capitol, but there were 9 other foreigners who stayed there. A couple of Catholic priests from Poland. There was a Swiss man with the Red Cross. There was some Catholic sisters who were at an orphanage. But this is, I don't have a lot of pictures of the carnage of all of that. You're familiar as you study history. You go online and you can see all of those pictures. What I want to talk about this morning, when we talk about 1994, is a little bit about the people who stood up against the genocide. But also, I want to explore, thank you for cooperating, Mr. Phone. I want to explore with you afterwards. How do people live together after something horrible like this? I could spend a long time telling you about Rwanda is so much more than genocide. When you have a bad reputation, you all know how hard it is to change a bad. But Rwanda, this is 28 years ago. And the Rwanda of today they don't see themselves as being a developing country forever. They're like, why should we be forever developing country? And so they're making huge, for probably 6 years, they've been making deliveries to clinics with drones. And in repairing the relationships, more than 1 million people, 7 million population. This is tiny. I think all of your states in India are bigger than Rwanda. It's a tiny little country, most densely populated country in Africa. At that time, 7 million people, and more than 1 million are going to be killed. And so everybody is going to be touched. Either you're related to somebody who killed, you're related to somebody who was killed, you're related to somebody who watched people being killed. The whole country. So if we're going to repair, we've got to empower the women too. Women, massive partners in rebuilding trust. That's really at the heart. Once you've lost trust, how can you rebuild that trust? And so we're going to talk about that and hopefully spend a little more time there. But and even talk about some families who have reinvented themselves. This lady survived with her daughter. She and her husband said, how are we going to protect our children? Because they were the minority that was marked for extermination. How are we going to protect our children? Maybe if you take our boys and I'll take, she says, our daughter. We come to your house, just me and my daughter, you might be more willing to help. Or me and my sons. 5 of us might seem too much. And it worked for her and her daughter, but not for her husband and sons. And if you were to meet her like I did in 2019, she would introduce Filbert as this valuable family friend. Oh my goodness. Every planting season, he's there with friends to help planting. Harvest, back again to help. In between, he does things for me like my sons would have done if they were still alive. Now, I already know that he was in the gang who killed her husband and sons. So when she says to me, he does things to our group. He does things like my sons would have done. You know my first response? If he wouldn't have killed them, they would be here to do it for you. Indicating I was still stuck in 1994. 2019, so that's 25 years ago. I was stuck in 25 years ago. She was not stuck in 19, and she had every reason to be stuck in 1994. She wasn't. So how do you get unstuck? How do you really see somebody as more than one thing? The killer of my husband and sons. How can you do that? And that's what I want to talk with you about. So I'm ready to go there right now. But if we don't talk about 94 a little bit more, we won't really appreciate and understand how far she has come in her journey. So, as Weston said to you, we moved there in 1990, working with ADRA. It feels good to have an ADRA shirt on. We went there building schools, partnering with the people of Rwanda to just make life better, huh? And we were there for 4 years. In fact, it was great for our children. Our children loved. I always joke, it's easy to find our boy in the neighborhood. Where is that? They call foreigners Mzungus, you know. Where's that little Mzungu boy? And he's right out there playing with his friends. And I'm going to give you a quick history lesson, okay? The late 1800s, the Germans are there. After World War I, the Belgians. They find a Tutsi king. The minority has a king. And they think, this guy must be superior. Maybe the Tutsis are superior. This is a time in the 30s and 40s when Hitler is talking about a master race. When in America we're talking about eugenics, superior, inferior people, and that's penetrating along with the colonialism all around the world. I'm sure you have your stories here in India of that time period and this idea of superior and inferior. And the Belgians introduced an ID card. So your ID card would have on it, if you were part of the majority group, it would say Hutu, H-U-T-U. But this one, Hutu's crossed out, Twa, very small minority, crossed out, naturalized. This person is Tutsi, the group of the king. Like, you Tutsi, yeah, you're our partners. You Hutu, keep in the garden, we need food. But you Tutsi, we'll get a job, we'll get education. In the church was a big part of colonialism. And so for years, some of the Tutsi people were given privilege. I just have kind of a little timeline of what I was talking about. But when 1962 comes along and independence, then the Hutus begin to get power. Now, at the time of 1962, just leading up to that, there's a resentment against the Tutsi. Yeah, the Belgians gave you the privilege, the Belgians gave you the jobs, now it's our turn. And they started this phrase, Hutu power, Hutu power. And Tutsi people were killed, some of them were protected by their neighbors, and some of them fled the country to Uganda, or the Congo, or Burundi. They will come back a week, 2 weeks, a month, we'll be back. No. 10 years? No. 20 years? No. In fact, it was, go back to this picture. It was 28 years until they came back, but they didn't come back like by invitation. They came back by force because the government, Hutu power, had said, no, there's no place, we're too crowded, we don't want you here. So they got military training and they formed these Tutsis who had fled the country. They formed the Rwandan Patriotic Front. And with that military force, they came in 1990. We had 3 years of war. Finally, the government said, okay, come on, right here. We'll come a peace agreement. Everybody will be part of a new transitional government. But there's the small group of extremists who said, no, we will never share power. And they launched a coup. And their first job is going to be genocide. Let me just give you a little. Genocide. How do you begin to explain this horrible word? Huh? I mean, we know homicide, and yeah, please, I'm actually pleased when people take pictures. It makes me, because I'm like, please, these pictures are free for you, and if you're talking to your family or anything, so feel free to do it anytime here. This is my most basic. 18 years ago, when I started traveling, I came up with this, and I haven't found a more concise, more relatable way to explain that we're going to solve a problem by getting rid of somebody. That's temporary at best. That's genocide at worst. And so April 6, 1994, we were supposed to have the new government in December, delayed. January, delayed. February, March, April, delayed. The president has been at peace talks in Tanzania, trying to launch the new government. He's flying home. 2 surface-to-air missiles shoot his plane out of the sky. He and everybody on there is killed. And the extremists, they say, the Tutsis, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, those Tutsis who attacked our country, they killed our president. Launched the movement now. We should have killed them all in 1962. If we would have killed them all in 1962, we wouldn't be dealing with them now. Nobody is spared. Grandma, no. Baby, no. Go in the courthouse, destroy birth certificates, destroy property deeds, destroy any evidence that they ever existed. Genocide. And so the next day they'll kill the prime minister. She wasn't Tutsi, she was a minority, but she wasn't part of the extremists. Anybody in the way of our plan, we're going to eliminate them. Because we had a 3-year war, and then we had a peace agreement, the UN said, good job, Rwanda. We'll come stand with you. And they sent 2,500 soldiers to Rwanda. So when the plane is shot down, there's 2,500 soldiers. There's 30 soldiers protecting the prime minister. Of those 30 soldiers supposed to protect the prime minister, 10 are Belgian. 20 are from West Africa. They will kill the Belgian soldiers, and they will chop them into pieces. They knew if we kill these black UN soldiers, the world isn't going to care. But if we kill Belgian, white, European soldiers, the world will take notice, and they'll get out of Rwanda. Get those 2,500 UN soldiers out of Rwanda. Get all the foreigners who are there building schools and doing projects. Get them out of Rwanda, because we're going to do genocide. And the UN could get in our way. The foreigners could get in our way. And so the UN will withdraw those soldiers. There's been about year-and-a-half campaign on the radio that we're under attack. There's not enough. And that was easy to say during the war. Huh? And it moves people down into what we call the amygdala. We're all familiar with fight-flight thinking. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this group now, they launched their genocide. If your ID card says Hutu, you'll be okay if you cooperate. If you try to protect the Tutsi, we'll kill you too. And we're going to kill anybody in the way of our power. We will never share power. And so the American government, all the other governments, they tell their foreigners, out of Rwanda, out of Rwanda. We're preparing. European governments, flying, come to the airport, we're leaving on a plane. America, Canada, Germany, no, the president's plane was shot down, I think we're gonna drive. So we'll drive to Burundi, go to the ambassador's home, go to the international school, go to the embassy, whatever's close to your home, bring your family. My mother and father were visiting, so this is kind of funny because today I'm 2 years older than my father was in 1994, okay? But begin to imagine what it was like for my parents. You see, here's the big problem. They had said, bring your family, but don't bring any Rwandans in your car. We'll be stopped at roadblocks, and those roadblocks, if there's a Rwandan in the car, it will compromise the safety of everybody. Do not bring Rwandans. Which really just, it gives me a knot in my stomach. Because the people who are doing genocide, we condemn them for killing somebody just because of their ID card. But the Western governments are condemning people because they're Rwandan. No, we can't help you, you're Rwandan. If you're Tanzanian, okay. If you're Polish, okay. If you're from but if you're Rwandan. So in our house, we had a lady who lived and worked in our home. And she just loved on our children. And we trusted her, and she was of the minority. So we were quite certain if we leave, she and the young man who came in the evening as the watchman, he was also Tutsi of the minority. And we're like, the people of Rwanda have been so generous, so gracious to us foreigners. They've given us privilege we didn't earn. Now maybe we can use that privilege to at least help these two people. So my wife and I make the decision that I'll stay and she'll take the children. My parents, my father, who I trusted more than anybody else in the world, he'll take my wife and children to safety. I'll try to use this privilege that they've given me to just at least help these two people not to be killed. Because I said to my wife, 2 weeks, this can't be longer. I mean, I didn't know that the UN was going to leave. I didn't know that more than 1 million people would be killed. There's a lot I didn't know, but I did know that these two people in our home would be killed if we left. And there's a chance that if I stay, and you can imagine my father. No, Carl, I can't. You know, your family is your responsibility. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, I know. But my family is bigger than just my wife and children. My family is bigger, and some of our family can't leave. So what are we going to do? And he's like, well, how are you going to help them if you're dead? And I can only begin to imagine. Now I'm a grandpa, and I can only begin to imagine what it was for my father. So you know what he said? He said, okay, then I'm staying with you. And I go, no, Dad, you've got to take Teresa and the kids. I'm counting on you to do that. And so it was a very challenging time to make that decision. But we decided when you look at this through the lens of a family, it changes everything. This young lady, she did survive, got married after most of her family was killed. And she married a man after the genocide who had a Hutu ID card before. Today in Rwanda, it doesn't say Hutu Tutsi in your ID card. It's just a normal ID card for regular life. And people were surprised, what? Her family was killed by Hutus? And she married a Hutu? And she says, no. My family was killed by extremists. She made that difference. And the other thing she said, we're all children of God. And so Teresa and the children will leave. They'll eventually end up in Nairobi, Kenya. And she doesn't want to go back to America because she's afraid of losing communication with me. During these 100 days of slaughter, we were able to talk on a ham radio every single day. She went to the American Embassy in Nairobi, and they bent the rules. They let her in the communication room, and we talked. Her name, Teresa Wilkins, on the radio, the initials, Tango Whiskey. And so she would call on the radio. And our home radio was used for the work of ADRA around. So my home radio was called 7-6. So till this day, when she says, 7-6, 7-6, this is Tango Whiskey, do you copy? I get this great feeling inside of me. And those radio conversations were just incredible. Okay, now, I just want to tell you a tiny bit more before we got to look at how do you put this back together. In my house, I had the young man and the young lady who were marked to be killed, and then I had this pastor and his wife, Pastor Soraya and his wife. They were of the majority, so they were not marked to be killed. She would help us get food. He was this deep well of wisdom and advice and counsel. And I had my ADRA colleagues who I've been working with, building schools and things like that. I'll talk about this man in a moment. And so, after 3 weeks of being stuck in our house, I didn't even put my shoes on. For 3 weeks, we're stuck in the house collecting rainwater. The pastor's wife is talking to the neighbors, buying a little bit of food and stuff. Then I said to the pastor, it's good we're all alive, we're grateful, but we gotta do more. And you will appreciate this, I think, so much more than the students I talk to, because you understand how life works. He said to me, if you're gonna do anything outside of the house, you've got to build a relationship with the people in power. But of course, you can see the problem. The people in power are doing genocide. So that's a strange advice for a pastor to give. You know, if you're going to do anything outside the house, you've got to, and I'll start to build relationships with the colonel who's in charge of the city, also in charge of genocide in the city. And he'll give me a travel permit to go through. That signature and that stamp got me through roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And he'll send me to orphanages around the city. So a strange partnership is developing between this foreigner who chose to stay and this girl whose job is to do genocide. Of course, we never talk about genocide, we just talk about helping people who are in need. And the obvious ones in need are the orphans. And that's what this picture right here, this is my friend now, Damas, and his wife had an orphanage with about 80 children. But then when the killing begins, parents are like, where can I take my children? Where can I take? Maybe to the orphanage. 100, 200. By the time it's finished, he'll have more than 400 children in this orphanage. And when I get there the first day, in the parking lot, I see graves. And I'm like, these are kids who've been killed by the violence. No, he says, they've died from diarrhea. I'm like, what? Nobody should die from diarrhea. He says, please, if we can just have water and a little medicine, maybe we can save them. So that's what my ADRA colleagues and I will do. We'll bring water, food, and medicine to 3 groups of orphans trapped around the city. So if you would like to, I've got to tell you one more story. This is one of my ADRA men who is working with me. Now, I should have pointed out in this picture back here that 3 of these men have a Hutu ID card, the majority, but their wife is a Tutsi. See, it's not a story in Rwanda of Hutu and Tutsi. They married each other all the time. They speak the same language. They go to church together. They drink beer together. Again, this man, Hutu, his wife, Tutsi. These 2 were both Hutu. They could have gone to a quieter place in the country, but they accepted my invitation and came to my house. And so this man, Gasikwa, he had more than 40 people who came to his house looking for protection. About half of them were children. And when they came to kill the people at his house, I feel bad doing this so quickly, but you'll appreciate. I'm thinking if somebody comes to attack my family or people I'm protecting, trying to protect in my house, and they're my neighbors, I'm gonna be like, we know each other. These are women and children. What's wrong with you? What will that do to him? Will he be like, oh, sorry, I didn't know? Of course he knew that, but he's afraid. And when we're afraid of being labeled the enemy, we move down into the part of the brain that I talked to earlier, the amygdala, the fight-flight part of the brain. And we're not capable here in the prefrontal cortex, where the good things happen, that's shut down. And everything is about fight and flight. And this man, without knowing neuroscience, he knows people, says, your children must be hungry, huh? These are difficult times we're in. Would you like some chickens? Can you see how he's bringing them from the amygdala? Some people in literature, it calls it amygdala hijack. You've been taken prisoner by fight flight. And through kindness, through empathy, he moves them to the good part of their brain. Now I'm super excited about this simple idea by itself, not so I can point out, you're trapped in your amygdala, no, so I can be aware of myself when I'm trapped in my amygdala. And then I can have a strategy, go for a cycle ride, to get out of that frustration, that anger, clear my mind, and get to the good place up here where I can actually be human again. This man, Gasikwa, also demonstrates a principle that is so important to me and so unnatural. When Maria said, this man helps me like my sons would have helped me if they were here, my first response is not empathy. My first response is, well, if he wouldn't have killed them, they would be here. I really want to rewire my brain for an empathy first response, because that's going to keep me in the good place. Creativity, logic, and compassion and empathy, problem solving. And so Gasikwa, to me, demonstrates habits. You know, they say that the more we fire pathways in our brain, the more we rewire our brain. There was one point in my life where I was feeling really critical, and I said, okay, I'm going to rewire my brain. I'm going to try an experiment. I don't think that gratitude and criticism can really live together for long. One is going to push the other one out. And so I started with food. It's easy to be grateful for food, huh? I said thank you to my wife. I said thank you to Taco Bell. We don't have Taco Bell in India, do we? Yeah? Why haven't you taken? No. And so I say thank you to everybody. The people who are preparing the meals, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm driving into New York City to speak at a school, and they charge me $15 to cross a bridge. And I'm like, oh, that's like robbery. As I'm going across the bridge, $15, and something fires in my brain. Did you thank the man that you gave $15 to? And I'm like, no, of course not. He was part of the system that robbed me. He wasn't. He was just doing his job. This morning at the hotel, you thanked the lady at the breakfast buffet, and you had a wonderful exchange, and dopamine was fired in your brain, and a positive start to your day. Why didn't you thank the toll taker? Now, I can promise you, I never would have thought to thank the toll taker if I didn't already have pathways of thank you for food. Once I had a lot of pathways, always grateful for food, very easy to form new pathways, thank you to the person taking the toll. I am. Everything I do, every decision I make, every cycle ride I take, I'm rewiring my brain. Or every decision I make to sleep in, we won't go there. And then the cycle ride I don't take, anyway. And so, my friend Gasikwa really demonstrates a super important principle that I call reframing. Changing the way you look at something or someone changes the way you experience it. I saw these men as killers. He saw them as neighbors. I saw them as the enemy. He saw them as fathers. If we can see people as more than one thing, we've got a chance not to be trapped in our amygdala. We've got a chance to find a human solution to the problem. So, okay, that is longer. I'm supposed to be done by now. Okay,
It's okay.
so, thank you. I just need one person to give me permission.
No, yeah, I'm enjoying it, please.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So, here's the problem. The genocide will end, it will end with this same Rwandan Patriotic Front who was fighting for 3 years, forced the government to the negotiating table, and then the extremists launched the coup. So General Kagame and his soldiers picked their guns back up, and it'll take them 3 months to drive the extremists out of power, out of the country. And then they've got to set up a new country. How are they going to build? They looted the country, and now there are literally bodies everywhere. Bodies everywhere. And so here's what President Kagame said at the 25th commemoration. He said the 20th commemoration, 20 years after the genocide. He said, you know why our country is doing for? You know why we have a 9% growth rate? You know why we're doing so well? These 3 things. We decided to stay together. There's not Hutu land and Tutsi land. Some of you are familiar with the former Yugoslavia, the Bosnian genocide. And the solution there was, we'll separate. You'll have this piece and you'll have that piece. Until today, there is not peace in that region. But in Rwanda, they said, no, we are Rwandan, not because we're a Hutu or Tutsi. We're Rwandan because of values like integrity. Integrity is what makes you Rwandan. And so we'll stay together, we'll be accountable, and we'll think big. And one of the ways that he thought big was they did away with the death penalty. Now you can begin to think, some people are like, what? Okay, maybe before the genocide, I wasn't sure about that. But after the genocide, if anybody deserves to be killed, these people who did genocide deserve to be killed. And the president said, no, this is not the way to build peace. This is the way to continue the cycle of violence. And he went and had town hall meetings around the country, difficult meetings, people angry and stuff, but he's trying to help the people understand death penalty is not the way forward. It's not going to give us the peace we want for our children. For you, you might think, yeah, death penalty, but what about for our children? And when you start to reframe, instead of thinking about what I deserve, but I think about what my children, and now for me, my grandchildren, what they deserve. The other thing is this idea I mentioned earlier. This is thinking big in Rwanda, in a country that is so male-dominated and stuff. But he said, listen, if we're going to rebuild peace, we have to have the power of the women in our country. So in the Constitution, it says 30% of all decision-making groups, 30% of the parliament, 30% of any group who's going to make a decision, minimum 30% has to be women, or 1/3. I think it may be 33. Anyway, you get the idea. Today, the parliament in Rwanda, 63% women. The role of women in rebuilding trust in the country. Now, back home, it still might be a different story. Because culture's change. But the government and the policy moving forward is like, this is the direction we're going to go, and we're going to do it in our programs and plans. Hopefully, maybe at home, this will I won't go there. Okay. So, there's more than 250,000 people accused of killing their neighbors. We don't have enough prisons. We're locking them in storerooms. What are we going to do with all these people, huh? And we don't have money for food and for education and healthcare. Who's going to have money for prisoners? Who's going to have money for trials, lawyers, and all of these things? So the president, it's an interesting journey too. There's a book that's being written by a professor at Harvard about General Kagame, President Kagame. We're the same age. We were born in 1957. So at the time of the genocide, I'm 36, he's 36. Today, he's nearly 65, I'm nearly 65. I have enormous respect for this man. I know there's a lot of international criticism, and I'm happy to talk about that. But this man is going to transition from military leader to civilian to democracy. Okay, I almost wanted to say democracy, but it's an interesting story in Rwanda. Can you imagine? Listen to this, huh? The Minister of Foreign Affairs, maybe 5 years ago, she said, the rest of the world practices adversarial politics. We practice consensual politics. What? That's not possible, huh? How can you have politics where people work on a basis of let's all agree? No, most politics are, okay, here's our side, here's your side, who gets the most votes? We win, you lose. They're like, no, we're working in another more modern way to say it. We're working on a win-win basis. So anyway, in this idea of changing from a punitive system to a restorative system, from blaming to healing, let me explain what I mean. The one we most are familiar with is you find out who's to blame, you punish them, and we kind of have justice. Mostly lawyers and judges, whatever witnesses we need to accomplish this. A restorative model is based on understanding the harm, then making a repair plan, and we need all the voices to do it. Okay? Look at this way now. This is a little more sophisticated. I have so much fun making these graphs. I just want to know they're also people. I mean, I know it's obvious, but they have friends. They have school teachers. It's in their lives. And so can we, with some can we challenge authority in a non-violent way? Now, as soon as that came out of my mouth, another voice said to me, Carl, you're in India. There's this guy named Gandhi. And so to talk about non-violence, I can't begin to talk. There's so much I want to learn. But I do know in my own life that when I can do